And we're on. Welcome to the End of Seeking podcast with myself, Martin, and
me, Imogen.
Welcome, everybody. This is episode 42. Okay, that is, in fact, the answer to life, universe, and everything, according to Douglas Adams. So,
let's see if we can live up to it. No pressure.
No pressure.
So, what do we want to talk about? We were just sitting here talking, and we keep promising to do a podcast. So,
well, we were talking, and then it was like, oh, let's put the mics on and see what happens.
Yeah. So we don't have anything particular that we're.
We used to come with a theme, didn't we?
Yeah.
Not always, but the idea was we had a little list even of the things that we were kind of. But it doesn't work like that. It's all about spontaneity, I realize, and so you just got to turn up and start talking. I think is the actual answer to.
Trust
this.
what's lively, what wants to come out.
But it's a bit like doing satsang, isn't it? Sometimes that as you sit there, a question will pull out some, some knowledge, some insight, some perspective. But when left, often it just settles into silence, which is not great for radio or podcast.
No, lots of big silences. No. And I think that's why we're thinking of doing a podcast, because we're sitting here talking naturally anyway.
What are we talking about?
What were we talking about? We've been talking a lot about upaya recently and skillful means. That's something we've been talking about.
Okay, let's pick up on that one. Why not? Because you just wrote a piece on upaya, which is really beautiful. And we talk about it a lot. And we make the case, I do, you do, make the case, well, I'll speak for myself. I think skillful means, for those who don't know what upaya points to, upaya is a Buddhist term which means basically skillful means. It means that the very nature of Buddha nature itself, but the nature of teaching has to be skillful means. It has to meet the person where they are.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
and
not
that's
a
not always, it's not always this uncompromising, definitive truth you only express at that level. It's about helping someone wherever they are to get further on, to see more deeply, and that's upaya.
Well, you were just talking about, we were having a conversation about Ramana Maharshi particularly, and sort of the Neo-Advaitin sort of movement of, pointing to Ramana as someone that always pointed to, I am that, who am I?
Like what was Rama's message, and this idea that he was necessarily this exemplar of uncompromising absolute truth, always saying, just ask, who am I, who am I, who am I? But actually, if you look at this body of work, he speaks a lot of different angles and levels to whoever would come to him, and he would reach people where they were. And that wasn't always the uncompromised, well, there's no one to do this, nothing to do, and these sort of non-dual tropes.
Well, it sort of speaks to the skillfulness of using provisional pointers to point beyond themselves even. Yeah. But you don't start in the absolute. You point provisionally to where their perspective is coming from, and point past it and point beyond it. But if you only ever speak beyond where someone is at, there can be room for a lot of misunderstanding as well.
Well, it's a bit like, and you'll see this in Ayurveda and Ayurveda practitioners who one of the points. I remember, I think you had a consult once with an Ayurveda consultant, and the idea came up in there that there's no point prescribing something, whether it's change in behavior or whether it's some prescription that you have to, eat or consume, or, change your diet or take a medicine. There's no point prescribing something that the patient can't or won't take.
Yeah.
even though if you take this one thing, this will cure you. If you can't take that, well, there's no point prescribing it, and the physician has failed, right? So from that point of view, so well, what can you take then? What if you can't change your lifestyle, for example, in this way that would prevent this thing from coming up, but that would cure you. If you can't do that, well, what's an intervention that not only would work, but you could accept?
Yeah.
And that's the essence of upaya. It's like what can you said a beautiful quote, and I wonder whether it was in your piece. A truth forced is a truth not accepted.
Yeah. That's exactly what I said.
Was that exactly?
A truth I'm not forced sure that was the words, but it was...
A truth not accepted, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's futile. Yeah. And so skillful means, upaya is about skillfulness in reaching the individual and helping them to maybe move the needle a bit. Because upaya isn't just some random, when you're talking about skillful means, it's not... And provisional truths, let's say, you're not aiming just to talk absolute nonsense. It's not just anything goes.
That's the skillful bit of it.
The skillful bit is about pointing, in the direction that would lead to, a higher an understanding and ultimate truth ultimately.
Yeah, and that's very much about being, for me at least, being very tuned in to the field, to the energetic response, to the person you're sat with or the group you're sat with, even just to feel like the energy of whether there's an opening there, whether there's an ability to meet what wants to be said. And it's almost like before it's even comes out of the mouth, I can feel the fluid nature of the words, whether there's a fluidity to them or not. If there's not a fluidity to them, there's something in the environment that is maybe not ripe or ready or suited or open to that thing that wants to be said. Yeah. And so for me, it's always more about tuning into a deeper listening rather than asserting, oh, this is what needs to be said and why.
Yeah.
It's not
whether they'll hear it, whether they can hear it or not. It gives me I have this image now of water flowing around rocks and, creating it. Upaya is about finding the way where the water will flow onward towards its ultimate goal, not necessarily just trying to force its way into somewhere where it doesn't want to go.
Yeah. Well, I had my last satsang, I had a question come up which is relevant to this, and it was this thing of those that are maybe now baby boomers or older generations that when they were sort of encountering spiritual teachings, it was all about the transcendent, all about awakening, enlightenment. None of it was about embodiment or integration or sort of the humanity of the awakened experience. And the question was around, why is that? Why was that not talked about back then, really? Why was it sort of awakening as seen as this promised land of like, once you get to this place, all will be fixed? And now, decades later, the sort of the messaging is shifting somewhat. And certainly in my work, like I'm very focused on embodiment, awakening in an embodied way. And, we had a whole conversation about that. But my view of this is the ripeness we're talking about there, like what people can hear and what they're ready to. I just think the collective wasn't quite there yet. Yeah. Like it was like, actually it reminds me of the book I'm writing right now. It's like one of the things I say in the book is there's the journey to God and then there's the journey in God. And I think back then the message was very much the journey to God. So the message was that of the spiritual seeker awakening to the nature of reality. But there wasn't much about what the living reality of that journey beyond there is. And I think now there's a ripeness. And actually, I would go further than just ripeness. I would sort of, I tend to couch it in the terms of maturity. There's sort of a
Yeah.
maturity in the seeker that is seeking to see that it's not just about realization, but it's also about the embodiment of that realization too. So there's these two aspects to the journey there.
Yeah, I think so. I'm reminded of Adyashanti talking about getting lost in the transcendent.
Mm-hmm.
That idea that you know, discovering that ground, but in its sort of pure consciousness state, and then really, in some way dismissing all the embodied components, all the manifest aspects of humanity, the world, the other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all those things are, at a certain stage of awakening, can be sort of dismissed.
Yeah.
And it takes some time and some integration to sort of, I talked about this from my own experience, was, you know, heading towards awakening, my attention was in, you know, and then sort of discovering that ground, let's say. I mean, I'm definitely truncating the process here, but it's something like that. My whole focus was inward, and the whole focus of my life was in support of this inward journey, quotes, recognition, realization. And then as that established, then it's almost like, because I have to use the analogy, the attention sort of flipped outward again, but now it was looking from there.
Mm-hmm.
And then going, oh, there's a world, you know, having, you know, found the place of establishment as the sort of seer. Yeah, it sort of, it turned around and then was a sort of an outward looking thing again. It was, I remember like my early writings, you know, post awakening were, I've been so caught up in this experience, and now I'm looking around and seeing all this stuff going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the beginning of embodiment, to actually go, oh, now I've established this. Or I say I, you know, let's not get too. Now that this is established, I have to contend now and integrate and embody this ground in a kind of a pervading way.
Yeah,
Inclusion.
I mean that's the
transcend
challenge.
And include, right?
Yeah.
That's the great, you know, movement.
A lot of people focus on the transcend bit, and rightly so, because that's what's necessary to be established.
Mm-hmm.
But there can be a disappointment of lack of integration there, that you come to that recognition of the transcendental quality of being and of self. And yet there can be an incongruence between that and daily life, that somehow daily life is still here with its struggles and relationships and dynamics and, you know, activities and all of this. And so that's the embodiment aspect, the integration aspect of, you know, awakening is not in a vacuum.
I like this. It's funny. We talked about this a few weeks ago, and I'd been looking at touching on this idea of viewing, let's say, relativity as illusion, as necessarily illusory, and that's not the only way to. That even that to say it's illusory, while not being false, having truth, it is still a conception of it, right? And different, let's say, teachings. I was looking at, I think it was Kashmir Shaivism, the more sort of tantric view of you know, this it is non-dual, obviously. But the way that would be described or conceived of is slightly different.
Yeah.
It's not like pure consciousness is, or Brahman in its sort of pure formless state is real, and the rest of it is unreal or illusory. In this sort of more tantric view, as I understand it, is that this is actually the way divine shows up. This is also of the nature of the divine. It's just the transient nature of the divine.
Which is much more aligned with sort of my view and my teaching, if you could call it that, is that, yes, this, what we call the world, the body, the personality, all of this is, yes, not a permanent aspect of experience, is also being. It's not separate from. And there's a stage, I think, where people sort of, I am not that. And that, I think it's and we've spoken about this before, but it's necessary to be able to see your sort of ground, let's say. But eventually that which has been separated from, let's say, temporarily, necessarily temporarily, so as in, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my body, I'm not the world, then needs to come back into the fold and included as a recognition, okay, I'm not only that, or I'm not essentially that, although that is being too, that is consciousness.
There's no separation between subject and object, and so the illusion is to imagine that these things are solid and permanent, or another word is used as that they're unreal. But reality in these traditions and this understanding means something different. They are real, but they're not permanent.
Exactly.
They are real, but they're not corporeal, meaning they're not material. The manifest world isn't material. It's consciousness, but it's inseparable from the ground. It is all that one. You have to remove all the notions of separateness and subject object distinctions. These fall away, and then you realize there is this singular reality. But so you can see how these, it's illusion, it's a dream, that those kind of ideas can be used as, they can still be held on to as sort of conceptual identifications.
Yeah.
Like, it's a form of kind of false knowing. It's illusion, and an illusion carries a lot of weight. And the idea is to just see what it is before you even label it illusion, or even label it the divine playing, or whatever. It's about what's beyond the labels, the reality of this of the real before the labels arise. But we can still see how those labels then, while being somewhat or even extremely true, still can catch the mind, catch the identifying mind.
And then suddenly the label becomes more primary to the actual direct experiencing of what is.
Yeah.
It all has to be held incredibly lightly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's I got into an interesting conversation, well, if you could call it that, online. I always have a hard time with the comments section, because you can get into some very interesting areas of discussion. You can get very sort of nuanced on language, and having a conversation in the comments section, someone sort of picking me up on my language of, as if I'm creating another identity out of being.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And this is the problem with that language, is like, you can any language can become sticky, and any language can become, quotes, dualistic.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as it comes out of the mouth, as soon as it's a thought, it's in that realm. And so we can endlessly pick ourselves up on language and just assume that, like, language is landing in a new identity, let's say.
Yeah.
But so much of what is being pointed to and from is prior to that language. The language is just the vehicle of that pointing, but it's not at all what what reality is.
Well,
say.
that interestingly, I know that point of view that you're pointing to, where it can be mistaken that when we talk about being, you're conceiving of it, beyond the being, beyond the personal identity, that somehow being then becomes its own form of identity. But of course that's exactly touches on this thousands of year old debate about how best to express the ineffable, right? Which is, and the famously, it's the distinction between the Buddhist view, typically, and the non-dual Advaitin view, the Vedantic view, which is the idea of that the ground is self, Atma, Brahma, let's say Atma.
That's the Advaita.
That's the Advaitin, the Atma. And the Buddhist said, and so you find that ground and go, oh yeah, the self, right?
Capital S.
Capital S self. And then the Buddhists would say anatta, no self, anatman, basically, non-atman, not self. No, there's no self to be found anywhere, even in the ultimate sense. But the question is, are these actually accessing and speaking from the same ineffable place, or are they talking about two different realities? And why I find that interesting is that I find each one to be entirely valid. You could say that there's no self at all to be identified, big, large, small, anything in between. Or you could say that being itself is self. I find them both valid. So you can look at awakening as like the discovery of the final boundless identification, or the collapse of the function of identification altogether. The point is that from that perspective, living that as a lived reality,
irrelevant.
Words are going to be tricky anyway as containers for that truth, and at best they can kind of point to it and you can try to express it yourself. And venerable saints, sages and teachers for thousands of years have come at this and spoken about this. I mean, if you look in the mystic tradition, they'll talk about it as God, right? Okay. That's valid too. You're talking about the ultimate singular ground and of all being. Fine.
It's trying to put a label, trying to put a name, trying to put a concept on that which can only be known, but not known in the mind, like known in the sense of knowingness.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so difficult. I always marvel at like the fact that there's all these words. In fact, that's part of what I wrote this morning and published. Like all these words are here, and yet these words are not. It's like we cannot describe or know or grasp
fully
this.
Contain or
and yet,
or definitively express it.
And yet words are continually flowing, pointing at this and from this, and the paradox of that. And I feel like I'm constantly living in that paradox, and it doesn't resolve itself.
No, it's an endless expression. What I said, the endless blossoming of this bloom of being itself, constantly the wellspring of expression from within itself. That's never going to be. And yet we can say some relatively definitive. But often they're what's the word? Apophatic. They're negativa. We can say it's not this, it's not that. It is not this, neither this nor that.
Well, because any one thing cannot grasp the depth and breadth and magnitude of existence. Let's say the ground of existence, and so. It's easier to say what it's not rather than what it is, because what it is exactly. Beyond all possible. I was going to say singular word, but even a 10,000 page book couldn't quite.
No, well, exactly. So you have to I think this was so beautiful about this whole thing is that we sit here talking about it, but ultimately, it's about living from it, and you do your best to kind of put words to it so that someone else might kind of follow the breadcrumbs to that in their own experience, and they'll go, oh yeah, okay, that it's there, it's ever present, and we try to point to it so that it's not that the pointings get taken on as some sort of idol in themselves.
Yeah.
Or something to hold up the knowledge, capital K. It's pointing to reality in your own nature.
Yeah, well,
and
then you get into the energetic transmission of the whole thing, which is beneath the words, and that's really where the juice is. And I mean, we've spoken quite a lot about that, but so even the words, while they can give something for the mind and body. To sort of land in temporarily and it's almost like getting on an elevator and riding the elevator down. So they can be helpful in that way to allow sort of a surrender into what is. But ultimately, they are just those breadcrumbs. They are just pointing one home
it's
to that which is already here. Sorry.
Yeah, right, yeah.
You were saying?
Well, it's the degree to which one can drop all the words, all the pointings, and sit awake, alert, and present to the reality that is prior to those words, pointings, and the pointings
without
are just
picking it up, picking up the conceptions again.
Exactly, they're just little boats trying to ferry you across the river, really, and. Yeah. It's already present. Always. And quietening the mind to a degree that one can experience just pure awareness here and now, open, unstructured, unconstructed.
Without the commentary of what this is.
Yeah.
And there's just an element that I keep, as you're speaking, the word trust comes in. It's sort of to trust one's, the word isn't quite right, but experience, or rather to trust what is.
Trust that you don't need to figure anything out.
Yeah, that. And I think what often people get hooked up on is there's sort of some sort of doubt or some sort of commentary that kicks in that says, yeah, but is this it? And is what they say, is their this the same as my this? Mm-hmm. And so then that sort of commentary, the words come back in to try and define this.
Yeah, simply this one. Papaji famously it's simply this. You are this. What is this though?
Yeah, and
so the mind's pulling it back out again.
Yeah,
isn't
and so there's I think that's why the word trust comes in here. It's like somehow there's enough trust in the system to surrender that doubt of, is this the same as that this?
Yeah, is my this same as your this?
Yeah, one.
Exactly.
And so it's that, and there's and I think that trust comes through repeated exposure to that non-conceptual experience of this.
So there is this, people often will ask about the difference or the relative values of sudden realization and gradual realization.
Yeah.
Each are valid in their ways, but I think what can happen is seekers can get fixated on sudden awakening.
Yeah.
And they therefore neglect any practice, particularly in this sort of neo-Advaitin scene.
Well, actually, I would go one step further. I think it's in this day and age, the day and age of instant gratification and TikTok and all the rest of it that gives you exactly what you want now.
And everyone wants just to get one-shotted on it, right? Bam, one day. So no practice, no orientation, no inquiry, just somehow one day, bam, you're Satori.
Everyone wants the instant fix.
And while that does, it kind of betrays, so I'm with Dogen on this, the practice is the enlightenment. So don't skip practice, because practice is how enlightenment expresses itself, how awakened mind is. So if you're sitting in no mind, or just sitting without constructing, sitting without grasping, open, aware, alert, you're there, that's it. And
it's the practitioner that goes, not the practice.
Exactly. And so, again, it's almost like anatta versus atman, is it the collapse of identity, or is it the discovery of a boundless self? Is it the end of practice, or is it perpetual unbroken practice?
This is it. So the more I get into all of this, as the apparent years go by, all I can really say is it seems to get more paradoxical, not less paradoxical. Like that's the reality that I find myself living is it truly is both and any attempt to have it land on one side,
neither nor,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah. But any attempt to land in one direction or another is in itself incomplete. It like gives rise to a contradiction that reveals again the paradoxical nature of existence.
Well, I would say ineffable, which is to say, unable to be fully spoken about.
Yeah.
It's beyond any. And I take your point though about the paradox. It being ineffable elicits thousands and thousands of words of expression on its behalf.
Isn't it bonkers?
It really is. It really is. But I like this principle. I think I might have talked about it before. It was something Mahesh Yogi talked about. He talked about the Vedas as this sort of expression of consciousness within and about itself, right? So you have these cognized expressions of the structures of reality itself, not written by anyone in particular, but simply the spontaneous expression from within consciousness by rishis, seers. And he called it the Aporashaya Bhasha, which is the uncreated commentary. And I think all this expression of truth in satsang, in spiritual discourse is because there's no one saying it, but it's consciousness speaking about consciousness to consciousness within consciousness.
It doesn't cease to be.
It doesn't cease to be this endless expression, and reality is that. By extension, the whole of reality is consciousness. Endlessly expressing itself in form and name.
Yeah.
And there's no end to it, because there could be no end to its infinite expression. You can't say, okay, I'm done now, full stop, over forever. And that possibly is an insight into the enlightenment thing, the expectation of a final full stop.
Yeah.
Now there is a kind of a full stop in a sense, a certain point of awakening where this formless ground is seen.
Well, I would say it's
realized.
It's sort of I said it in my last satsang actually, where your world is turned upside down. So where you thought you were going to being, like the world turns upside down in recognizing, no, I am being.
Yeah, I'm not in the world is in me.
Exactly.
As that. So that's real and true and in a sense final.
And a full stop of sorts, but
exactly.
it's a full stop of. It's not a full stop as in the end of the book.
No.
It's a full stop as in next chapter. Next chapter is lived from that viewpoint. And lived from that viewpoint, the lived portion of that is endlessly changing and moving and expressing and collapsing and reconstituting and dying and being born and all the rest of the changeful, the relative, I would say, it doesn't cease to be. It's just the context is seen as different.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know why this comes to me. It's a tricky one to get my head around. This, again, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he said once that evolution is more fundamental to life than existence. I find that quite. I'm not sure. I quite inhabit that. I find that an interesting notion. And again, I'm pointing back to I've banged on about this apokatastasis, which is this idea, and I'm butchering it, but I'm sort of taking it as my own understanding, really, that, you know, it's what you said. You know, the first half is was it journey to God, and then the second part is the journey in God.
Yeah.
And it, of course, it was always in God, let's say, or always in consciousness, but it's that so the full stop, let's say, or that let's put it a different way, the inflection point is where that's seen.
Yeah.
I see now that I'm not doing it, that I'm not the doer.
Aha. It can be a gradual aha.
It's the end of duality and the beginning of non-duality or unity. It always was that. It always was essentially non-dual, but the recognition comes that consciousness in itself knows itself.
Yeah, and there really can be a distortion of that clear seeing that gives rise to the misapprehension of our nature, which says I am a person interacting with other persons. Yeah. And so, you know, or I am an object interacting in a world of objects. And so that full stop is an absolute happening. You could call it a happening.
Yeah. Even though it's a collapse of something.
Yeah, whether it comes about gradually or suddenly is sort of irrelevant. It is still a full stop. It is still an aha, a recognition, a remembrance. However, the lived experience of that is what integrates and embodies.
After quotes that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the paradox there, is that it is both an event and a non-event in that way.
It is both an end and the beginning of a new continuation in a fundamentally different mode of being.
Yeah. And I think that's what's surprising to people. It certainly was to me, at least.
Yeah, well, it speaks to the Christian thing as well in some ways, this idea of being born again, right? You know, born again in spirit. And I can see how that would be a fitting description of before awakening and after awakening. You know, just... you're still here. You're still, you know, in the world, so to speak. But somehow the world is still in you. Well, that story that I found after my awakening, and I remember went to live in your dad's sort of, you know, isolated house in the middle of the Welsh hills or the fields. No running water and no heating. And I remember, you know, having to. I repeat the story because I found it hilarious at the time. It was laugh out loud at the time that I was having had a huge, you know, shift of consciousness, non-dual, and then finding myself in this place where I was carrying big jugs of water around and chopping wood in the garden, and I laughed out loud and I went, "This is a joke," and it was weird. It felt like a joke at the time. It felt like there was a cosmic joke being played on me. I mean, it's funny. I mean, the reason I mention this in some ways is because it was 11 years, a couple of years since that shift.
You mean a couple of days? It's 11 years ago, a couple of days ago, yeah.
11 years, a couple of days ago. So it's sort of on my mind that, gosh, what life has become and being experienced, you know, in that period. But I remember those early days. It was so strange. It was strongly dreamlike, but also like surreal as well. There were.
Yeah, I remember that.
It felt like life was sort of playing a joke because I was a seeker for so long that finally that seeking and that seeker that collapsed. It left a weird hole, and life was so strange, even though it was still what it was. I don't know, I'm rambling here, but It's hard to touch what a strange non-event event that was.
Yeah,
that
so
past that point, everything is different forevermore.
It is, and I think what you're pointing to that dreamlike quality of it, and that, again, I think that speaks to the embodiment aspect of it. It's like everything feels very fluid and very. There's no solidity to the experience because it's what had felt solid had been formed around a false solidity.
Yeah,
and so that's uprooted. And so it feels very disembodied in that way for a time, because the thing that was felt to be solid is now seen as not what's solid. And so it takes a while for that to sort of, that awakening to ground, to descend, to find its new solid ground in the lived experience of life.
But it's not a return. It's an advance to a different. So it's not like, oh, I go back to feeling more solid.
No. But the feeling does get more solid. But the ground in which it resides on, in, and as is different.
Yeah.
So
it is. It's a different. I know you're pointing to, but I speak about. Yeah. It remains for me fluid, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And yet somehow more grounded.
That's what I mean. It's not so disembodied. It's not so. The language, we're struggling to get the language because it is genuinely difficult to describe. But for me, it's this feeling of it feels grounded, not in the material, but grounded in the way of surety of being. Let's call it.
The being, the groundlessness becomes the ground, and I think actually, so this might be worth me. I'm getting stuck here a little bit in terms of expression, because I relying. Again, this is why the limits of words. Relying or using the word ground, even I use that a lot. It becomes the ground. It becomes the ground. It's the ground. Recognize the ground. Realize the ground. But in doing so, it's kind of, and to be honest, we're in good company with that, right? I mean, the Dzogchen used the word ground. Meister Eckhart is very keen on Grund, the ground, meaning spirit itself, right? Grounding in spirit. But, go on.
Well, so I've been obviously writing this book about embodiment and this whole process, and I've identified within that, and again, it's not, the language isn't perfect, but I've identified two types of ground that I often refer to. And there's like the somatic ground, like the body, the like feeling here-ness. And then there's the ground of being. And they are two different expressions of the same thing in different manners, in different dimensions. And that's how I sort of refer to that. So there's almost two grounds here, even though they're not two grounds.
Well, this is so I'm going to pull this apart for the purposes of this exploration. Is that so? Just to illustrate or point out that the words that we use themselves come with, we have to be so careful, and it's impossible to actually what's the word, equivocate. It's impossible to find the perfect words for this, because the ground necessarily, it's almost like we can't help but have that word orient ourselves to up and down. And a place. The ground is a place, or the ground is some object. I remember years ago I wrote this tweet about science, saying, the more modern science try to inquire deeply into the ground, like look for the essential, the ground, instead of finding more solid, it found it more abstract. Less solid. It became, they went looking for the building blocks, and look at that, the building blocks of reality, the presumption that at the bottom of reality there would be building blocks, right, of some kind, whether these are particles or whatever. But even all the particles collapsed into vibrations in fields. The fields themselves, there's nothing solid in there at all.
Yeah.
And so it's abstract, no materiality whatsoever. So I'm just pointing out the risk of, even when we use good and helpful words like the ground of being, we have to be careful that we don't reify the idea of it being a ground.
Literal ground.
It is the ground, but it's a groundless ground.
Is. Although I think the body, and so that's why I say somatic, like somatically speaking, the body can tune into a sort of a somatic physical sense of a feeling of ground, and that's slightly
it's a formless sense, right? It's not that you won't find a final shape at the heart of it all.
You won't. No, not at all.
So the ground itself is groundless, and that's where you find the grounding is in the presence of the open. I mean, you work with this stuff in your way, and you.
I guess the word stable would be a better word for me. There is like the
ground, even though it's
of being
formlessly stable.
Yeah, but it's a sense of stability, a sense of the only truly reliable thing. Ironically, not a thing.
Yeah.
But still, in language terms, reliable thing. That which doesn't come and go.
Yeah.
That which it does not change even in that sense. That which is not bound by time or space or physicality or quality or... You know, again, we're netting here. We're going, it's not this, it's not that, it's not bound in time, it's not bound in...
ironic that something so empty, spacious, and absent of form should be so stabilizing.
So solid. It's not physically solid, but solid in terms of stability.
You're right. There's an unchanging quality, and that's what we ground in. It's the unchanging. Yeah. But that unchanging is formless.
And yet...
It's boundless.
So it is, and yet...
And yet it's present. Or presence.
Yeah, presence. And yet, also on a different dimension, that shows up in the body as quite a physical sense of being grounded as well.
Right.
That's what I'm saying about these two, like, depending on the dimension you're talking on, there can be, like, there is another kind of grounding that is quite physically grounding as well. And...
But then physically, look,
I know. I know. But, okay, so I'm going to use a different language instead of grounding. Sense of here-ness.
Yeah.
So, that's what I mean about that somatic grounding, is that when an awakening happens, there can be this sense of disembodiment, of floatingness.
Right.
But as there's a integration and a deepening and an embodiment of this, a lived experience of it, what becomes quite solid, but not physically solid, but solid, is a sense of here-ness that feels very tangible and real.
And I would say reliable, right?
Yes.
You know, it's
but
like...
it's not about the body. It's
like that.
But it's tangible.
Yeah, I got you. It's a bit like that. Take refuge in. You know, this idea shows up in the traditions. Take refuge in whatever the Buddha nature. Some traditions, you know, you use the take refuge in the breath. You know, it's like, what can you reliably? Because you know, if you're dealing with someone who is experiencing, you know, dysregulation, and you know. You're not going to try to establish another identity, another false identity. You know, something you can hold on to that you can't, because you know, a big part of our fundamental sense of vulnerability in the world is that we are not cognizant of the ground, the very, you know, the essence, the unchanging essence of our being. So we're like a leaf on the breeze, and we feel very vulnerable about who and what we are. Rightly
we're
so.
We're attaching our sense of identity for that actually isn't stable.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're talking about grounding, you're finding that ever-present place of unchanging.
Yeah, and it can actually have
in amongst the relative expressions of itself.
Yeah, and so the relative expression of that is what you would call a physical grounding. I think like a sense of being here-ness. And so that's what I mean about those two types of grounding. And the language is absolutely imperfect here. I'm really recognizing that. But you can get a sense of it. You can get a sense of there's grounding in the ground of being, and then there's also the embodiment of that being as a grounded sense of here-ness.
Got you.
And those two things go hand in hand, but they are slightly different. And certainly the language around it is slightly different.
Well, it's interesting. You're currently working on a book where you're pointing at different, how do you put it, different qualities of presence and bringing different expressions around the different ways that are appropriate for.
Yeah, it's all in aid of the embodiment process. So this book is really working on the thesis of awakening can happen to different extents, but awakening can happen, but there can still be an incongruence, sorry, of the lived experience not quite catching up to the insight and the recognition that has happened, the realization that's happened. And so why is that? And the thesis is, for me, and this is based on 10 years of working with this, with people and myself. It's really about the recognition that why doesn't that happen? Because there's a quality of presence that is required to inhabit that expression of life, so that presence has, quotes, withdrawn. Now, ontologically speaking, presence doesn't withdraw, but experientially speaking, that presence is creating experientially a sense of separation, this, not that. And that's where we get an incongruence between our insight and our lived reality. So the book is all about the embodiment process from the viewpoint of qualities of presence.
Nice. It's quite cool.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Well, it's a very but it's a practical work, and it's through like these years of actually what you have personally, experienced and worked within yourself, but then, kind of proven out in the field to how this has, helped and bring about greater clarity and integration in others. And I love this idea that, how this work has unfolded for you in the world with others, that you don't go in, right, I have this thesis.
No.
This has been pure, intuitive, exploratory guidance.
I'm only able to articulate it just about now.
And only now you'll be able to go, okay, so let me pattern this out now. And I love that, how we live life before we can express it. You have to reflect back on it to sort of articulate the structures of it.
Yeah, I didn't realize this book was ready until it was ready. I didn't conceive. I knew eventually I would probably be writing on this, but I didn't expect it now. And the only reason I suddenly came to be now was like the final piece of the puzzle somehow clicked in place and went, oh, this is what I'm talking about. And this is what I've been doing. Like all the work I've been doing for the last 10 years it didn't come about as a plan. It came about as a response. And so I'm finally at a point in my life where I'm able to articulate that response and the power of that response and what it means to the individual who's going through this process. Up until, I could say even a month ago, I probably couldn't have articulated what I'm able to articulate now. And that's fascinating to me. Like watching this whole process.
Well, you were living it.
Yeah, it was like you're too inside of it to be able to express it. And then suddenly something occurred, and I can't even name what that something was other than a feeling, an aha moment of, this is, people used to say, what do you do? And I never could answer that question. Suddenly I feel like I'm able to answer that question more readily because I'm suddenly being able to articulate and see what it is that's happening in my life and has been happening for the last 10 years. And it's a surprise to me. I thought I was in this for awakening, and I am, but actually not as well. There's something much more nuanced that has turned out to be my life focus that I couldn't have ever predicted.
Yeah. I mean, I find this fascinating, though. You've always said, you're not always said, but often you've said, I'm not really talking about awakening. But you kind of are as well, but you're not. I love how when in your work, you're really taking what's in front of you, and it's like by bringing presence in the way that it is required in each individual, in each place and person. You're not talking about some grand overarching, project of awakening the world or anyone in particular. It's just about meeting, right? You're so much about encountering what the truth and what's required in that person, in that moment, in you, intuitively, practically, arguably, really in the presence of it. And so I'm always pushing back at your claim that you're not about awakening,
Well, I know I am.
No, no. And I know, but I know I know exactly what you mean.
It's not in the neat and tidy packaging that most people think it is.
But I guess my point to this is, as an outside observer on it, is that, if you've got if you've got a package, a parcel on your desk that's all knotted up and tied up, if you just unpack, you're not about opening the package and seeing what's inside. That's not at all. You address each piece of that. Okay, that knot wants to go in there and unravel that, and this needs to be unfolded here. And you're just meeting it exactly where you are, with no goal in mind really, other than the truth of that of bringing your presence and that attentive quality to bear. And at the end, once all the knots are done, boom, the whole thing falls open.
Yeah.
And awakening is there,
nice
right?
way of putting it. Yeah. I mean, so this is why I joke when people go, oh, what do you do? I go, I meet people. The thing is, they can take that at a superficial level, or they can take it at the level that I see it, which is I meet people.
Yeah. You really meet people. Yeah.
And that's presence, and that's the quality of presence. That's what this book is aiming to do in quite a practical way, is showing people how to meet themselves, which leads to being able to meet others with these various qualities of presence, what it takes, like actually what it takes, like what does it look like to cultivate that deep meeting in presence as presence.
Because there are particularities, right? I mean, that's the thing. So by contrast, in a way, sometimes I think I'm just some sort of oh, what am I, some kind of non-dual apologist? Because I'm not quite that, to be fair, but I'm exploring it in my own way, and as a lived experience, and as exploring different ways of that has been expressed, and how to express it.
We're very typical masculine and feminine, though. If you really, I hate to point it out, but it's just suddenly struck me.
Gender coded.
Yeah, it's just really like on the nose. Like I'm about the people and you're about the thing. It's like it like I just suddenly had an aha moment that you were sitting there talking about that. I'm like, we couldn't be more stereotypical
coming
in
from
that
the
way.
Same place, but approaching it, quite differently.
Yeah. It's quite funny. Sorry, that's highly amusing to me.
Right. Yeah. So. Yeah, I'm.
Yeah.
I have a different sort of, not different, but I have a different expression of it, and different exploratory mode in this, and I'm much more about how this gets expressed, maybe in a more abstract sense. I'm not entirely sure, not strictly, because I work with people, and it becomes more like what you're talking about. When I am in encounter, it is very much, you deal with the precisely and broadly with what's presented to you in that particular instance. and that's where the power is. There's no point trying to bring some grand overarching non-dual concept. It's not that at all. It really is about meeting. And I love this. I remember years ago sitting with Adyashanti, did an online, thing with him, and the big question that shifted me back then for a while was, look, let's put it this way: we're all Buddha nature. We are that capital T. We are the ground. We're already that. So what is it that stands in the way then? And in many ways, in your way, what you're doing, in my way, what I'm doing is like, well, what right now, what is standing in the way? And often it's not a lot. Sometimes it is, but then that's not the kind of people you're necessarily working with. Most people wondering about in their very materialistic worldview, oh, there's nothing beyond, the bricks and mortar of material life. There's a lot standing between that mind and self-realization, but that's fine. They're not seeking it. But for a seeker and someone who's come into by whatever means has come into a place where, let's say, their world is breaking down, or there's a deep aspiration. I mean, sometimes it's, a seeker can be, characterized by a kind of a breakdown, but also can be just like a deep aspiration to truth. Either can be true.
Well, it's probably a combination of both
right.
for most people.
But, there's many ways. Yeah. But the point is that there's this what's going on-ness. And a deep desire to actually get to the bottom of something.
Yeah, there's an existential imperative that sort of fills up the attention.
Yeah, exactly. You have to somehow get to. But there are grand narratives regarding what that's about then. But actually, the real work of that
is always met in the moment.
And the particularity of what is standing in the way right now, or what is presenting itself as needing, like as you say, a quality of presence that will allow that to, be met.
Yeah.
And release and all these different.
What's that quote? Here we go. I'm terrible at.
You're the worst quoter. But brilliant.
What's that quote? Truth to be understood.
Oh, it's a Terence McKenna, but I think it's also a paraphrase. He says something like, "Truth, when properly explained as to be understood, is accepted as truth."
Yeah. So it's in that
something like that.
And so if you take out, that's a very sort of heady way of explaining it. But if you look at what's actually been pointed to there, which is if clarity reveals itself sufficiently,
exactly, it's accepted.
It's accepted. So it's and I think
it becomes real.
Yeah. So what I'm really pointing to in that is this has nothing to do with belief. Absolutely nothing to do with belief. And so when sitting with someone, it's not about filling them up with more beliefs. It's about actually the undoing or the unconditioning to reveal the clarity of truth. And so really what you have to address in a person or in one's individual practice or inquiry is what is obscuring that truth. What beliefs, what conditionings, what ideas, what expectations are.
And how is it particularly in that moment showing up, right? What are you believing here, or what are you experiencing?
It's always in the specifics
right now that's causing you trouble.
Yeah. And so that's why the awakening process, and I think we've even done a podcast on this, but why it goes from general reading books and attending general satsangs to getting more and more close to, because it gets more and more about the specifics. The specifics is where the occluding veils of misapprehension are found. It's always in the specifics.
Definitely.
Go on. Well, I was just going to say, and so depending on someone's nature, you can come at that in different ways. You can come at that in the somatic, tantric quotes way, energetic way. You can come at it in the more
non-dual self-inquiry,
oh my God, my mind just went blank. What was the word?
Don't know.
So you've got bhakti, you've got
Jnana,
that was the word. Yeah. So that kind of style of like someone who's got a very keen intellect. And I'm not talking about intellect in terms of...
Well, intellect is discrimination, not thinking.
Yeah. So that's what I was
quite
about
different.
to make the distinction there. That intellect doesn't mean ego. It means clarity of discrimination or clarity of mind.
Yeah.
Again, not egoic mind, but pure mind, big mind there.
Yeah.
And so, there are some that are more devotional. And it's about surrender. And there are some that are more tantric, and it's about feeling and emotion and energy and somatics and body. And then there are some that is more about that intellect, that stillness, that silence, that clarity of insight, or inquiry. And so there's many ways into that. And that, again, we've cycled right back to the beginning of the conversation. Upaya, skillful means to be able to recognize someone's nature and to use that nature to if you see someone, and actually I'm going to not contradict myself, but add some nuance there. Sometimes someone is very, very heady and intellectually clear and discerning, and actually they need a bit more bhakti and devotion, and so it's not it's not necessarily what we think we need, but it's the skillfulness.
What is actually needed.
So that's the skillfulness. That's the upaya, the skillfulness to sense what is actually needed, and it's not like someone is an authority of that. It's and it can come internally or externally. It can come from a teacher or internally, but it's the skillfulness, the discernment to sense where the opening and the energy is flowing into.
Yeah. Oh, we've circled around perfectly. I think we should leave it there.
That was too good not to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Gonna cut it here.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, good. All right,
I just want to say, I know that, this podcast, people may be listening at any point of time, but for those that are listening in, April to 2026, Martin and I are doing a retreat in June. There's a couple of places left in Wales. And why I want to say that is because we did the same retreat last year, and we frequently got the comments from the participants who came that there was a beautiful synergy of the difference of our teaching and how it worked together.
Yeah.
And we touched on that today. I think that's why I wanted to mention it, is because actually there's something about you and I coming together in that kind of environment, and the fact that we are quite different, even though we're talking from and to the same place. That I think can be quite supportive for people. So I just want to name that, because we do have a couple of spaces if anyone feels like coming and joining us. It's a very intimate small group, and I just want to name that.
It's out there. You are invited.
Yes,
warmly.
Anyone who is called. All right.
Just to say, if you want to find out what about that, beyondimogen.com
/Saint Nons, STNONS.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
And we shall do it again sometime. Okay. If you feel like liking, subscribing, and sharing, that helps us. So, okay.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.